The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. Welcome to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Peter Hostrasser here. I got a great guest today. Michael Vargas, the founder of Lead by Impact, is here with us. Michael, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Peter, thanks for having me, and thanks for having this platform where we could discuss some pretty cool stuff.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's start unpacking that cool stuff. Let's talk a little bit about who you are and what you do right now. So if you want to give yourself a better intro than that itty-bitty one I gave you.
Well, I mean, that was a lovely intro. I appreciated it. To add a little more coloring to it. So I'm a business consultant. I work with teams and their culture. So helping them create collaborative and productive team cultures through psychological safety, building trust, and facilitating open communication.
Got it. There's a lot in there. And we're going to unpack that a little bit later when we start talking about, how you intertwine with education. I've got a great thing that I want to share with the listeners, so hold on to that. But here comes the juice about, Michael, everybody has their unique kind of educational path. And I'm going to provide you the time to actually go ahead and unpack that. Let's take a look at what kind of student Michael was, what happened all the way through your degrees, and how did you end up where you are right now?
Well, Peter, I really appreciate the opportunity to share that. Like I was saying earlier, it's going to be fun kind of going through the flashbacks of the past. So thank you for that space. So I'm originally from New York. I was born in the city, raised right outside in a place called New Rochelle, New York in Westchester County, 20-minute train ride into New York City. And when I think back about my earliest memory, it actually starts off with, which I haven't thought about in years, it starts off with kindergarten. And I don't remember exactly what happened or why it happened, but I remember sitting in a meeting with my teacher and my parents, and my teacher saying, "Your child has ADD and you need to get them on medication right away." And my parents were very much not about that. They were like, absolutely not. This doesn't make any sense. And so they actually pulled me out of that school and then put me in another school. They put me where I was then in this other school from first grade to eighth grade. So it was a small school. About my class was like 30 students. And it was actually a Catholic school, but it wasn't very Catholic-y, I guess you could say. We didn't have any nuns or priests or anything like that. And we only had religious class one day a week. So it just felt like a normal class. And we had people of different religions there. But my experience during that was, when I reflect back on it, pretty hard. Growing up as a kid, I was constantly picked on, bullied. Like I'm sure many listeners here know what that's like. So I know I'm not alone in that at all, which allows me to feel safe enough to bring this up and for you holding the space like this as well. And unfortunately, I was picked on and bullied at school, and I was actually similar. I just lived in a very aggressive household, let's just say. So whether I was at home or whether I was at school, I was very scared to just speak. Anytime I would speak up, there would be some sort of negative consequence. Some sort of, why aren't you getting this? Or students picking on me, saying that I'm dumb and things like that. So basically for the first, for those first to seventh grade years, I was just very quiet, just scared. And that's when I really learned about this idea of being so alone, because I'm so scared to speak up, to share anything, because I just don't want anything bad to happen. And then something changed, something different happened. And this was the best thing that ever happened to me. My parents put me into martial arts. East West Jiu-Jitsu Studios out in New Rochelle, which I found out they still have to this day. It's ran by this gentleman named Christopher Colombo, who was my Shihan at the time. And I remember when I first got there, I was like, what is going on here? This is really weird. People are yelling and screaming and punching things. These people are weird. And as I look back on that, that's clearly a defense, because I feel nervous and scared in an environment that I have no idea what's happening. And the environments that I've been in previously were not supportive at all. Like, even my teachers, they never really worked to support me. They just always kind of saw me as the dumb kid. At least that's what I felt from them. I don't know what they were thinking or believing, but that's what I experienced. My experience from them was on a pretty consistent basis. So going back to East West Jiu-Jitsu Studios, I started doing martial arts, and it is a completely different environment than I have ever been in my entire life. I was so encouraged. Christopher Colombo, his senseis, the students there, they're like, you can do it. 10 more push-ups, 5 more kicks. You're not done. You got this. You can do it. You can keep going. And I never had an environment like that before in my entire life.
That's got to, I mean, that supportiveness of, like, that's got to be a 180. So there it was. So that was 8th grade when that started?
7th grade.
7th grade.
All right. 7th grade when that started. And I, again, like you said, it was a 180 of the life I lived. I was like, oh, wait, there are people who care about me? Oh, this is what it really feels like. Oh, there are people who are encouraging me. Oh, I could do stuff that I didn't know that I could do. And my confidence started changing. And I was so in love that I just put everything I had into that martial arts. It was Japanese jiu-jitsu, blocks, kicks, punches, rolls, sweeps, throws, and break falls, and also how to make the person hurt themselves by using their own force against them, which is also part of Aikido. After a year there, I had the extreme fortunate pleasure to be asked if I can help start teaching the other students. I was beyond honored. It was the first time someone entrusted something so massive to me. And I was like, yes, please. And that was my life in 8th grade. So it was after a year. So 8th grade was really about, I was there 4 to 5 days a week from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. Just loving it. And the beauty of it was, again, being in that environment of, not only was I able to get encouragement, but now I was able to give it. Now I was able to support people and be there for other people in a way that I didn't even know I was able to, because I didn't know really existed. And that year was just amazing. The cool thing about it was, at school, things started shifting for me as well. Because of my confidence, I no longer allowed people to bully me. I no longer allowed people to be unkind to me. And after that, I actually started making friends. I was like, what? I didn't really understand it at the time, but looking back, it was this idea of me holding my boundaries, standing up for myself. And for the other students, it just completely switched. And now I was invited to soccer games and things like that. Those 2 years were life-changing. Like you said, 180, that was the thing that just made everything different for the rest of my life. Then I found out that we were going to move.
Yeah.
Right when I was learning to make friends, right when I had this community, we were moving upstate, about an hour and a half away, into Orange County. And I was devastated, just devastated, because I finally was making friends. So fast forward, freshman year of high school, it was a little bit of a interesting, bumpy ride. I made a vow that I would not allow anybody to pick on me or do any harm to me. I decided that I was going to join the football team. And I remember going to school, or going to the practices, and I was a little bit late. So I was only wearing the helmets. Kids had shoulders because in New York, and I think other places, the more you need more days to wear more pads and clothing and things like that. And I remember standing there, it's probably like my second day. I'm standing there just watching the field, and there's this big, big man, Tom White, freshman year as well, but this kid's like 6 foot as a freshman, massive guy. And he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, you." "Yeah." "Sit down." And I'm terrified. This guy's huge. I don't know anyone. He has a whole bunch of friends. I'm the new guy. And I look to him and I say, "No." And he goes, "All right, I like you."
That's awesome.
Totally. I was like, okay. And so high school was very much, I did not do very well at school, I would say, but high school for me was very much about making friends. That's what I really wanted to make friends. I got to do football, I did track, I did photography. That's where I started doing theater. I was just in as many activities as I could to really enjoy being a part of the community of students and make friends. Um, and then there's one teacher in there in particular that really resonated with me, that really connected with me throughout my 4 years. The teachers were fun. I never felt like I was seen as dumb or anything like that with these teachers. But also I never felt really connected to any of these teachers. But there was one teacher, Mr. McKay. He was my English teacher and also drama theater teacher. He was the first person to really sit down with me and ask me questions about my life. Like, what do you really want for yourself? Like, how do you want to be? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? And it was really incredible. It was really the second time outside of my Shihan, Christopher Colombo in martial arts, the second time an adult really sat with me and was curious about me and made me see and think about myself in ways that I never thought of. And the final year in final year of high school, I also took a psychology class. And there was something really cool about the psychology class where it's like, hey, you can learn about people to help people. And I was like, this is so cool. I can learn more about myself. I can learn about how I can help others. And so that's what I decided to focus on. So then I went to earn my bachelor's in psychology because I was really interested about learning about people. And college was fun. I got to more explore what I really liked. And I didn't do very well in high school and before, but in college, because I found something I was genuinely interested in, that I really cared about, okay, that's when I did way better. I had like a 3.7 GPA without trying that hard. It's because I cared so much about it. And then from there, I learned a lot about myself. And then I started connecting the dots of when I was young in martial arts. And I was like, well, I was in an environment where people really helped me, and that changed my life. What if I could start doing that for others? What if I could help create spaces and environments to help other people so that they can become better and more whole and feel connected? And so I decided to focus on that. Then I went to earn a master's degree in clinical psychology. So my bachelor's was at University of Albany, New York. Then I went to University of Central Florida and earned a master's in clinical psychology. And I really focused a lot on like group work. So my internship was at a substance abuse facility, outpatient, where I was working with people who had opioid challenges. And so my other friend, the other person in the program, we were both interning there, and we basically ran this outpatient detox program, which, by the way, was not okay. We should not, as students, have been given that responsibility, but as an internship, they were just saw it as free labor.
Right.
Incredible learning opportunity, and I should not have had that much power in my hands as a young student.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we worked for the year there, and we did a lot of group works and one-on-ones and worked to create like a whole curriculum for the program. And okay, what do they need? How can we serve them? And it was very exciting to figure out, okay, how do we create a space where these people can feel safe, where they feel comfortable, where they can open up, where they can share these awful things that people experience because of these substance challenges. And then from there, I took that experience. I was like, okay, I lived in New York, I lived in Florida, I loved working with people. Might as well go to California. New York, Florida, California
Why
is
not,
next.
right?
Yeah. So then from there, I moved to California. I started working at a substance abuse facility for mental health. I'm sorry, residential facility for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
People with schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD, and so on, and people who had. It was a 90-day program, and my role was basically running the groups there. We had 4 groups a day, 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Anger management, disorder discussion, mindfulness, healthy communications, and so on and so on and so on. And I loved working there. Another part of this story that I kind of forgot to mention earlier is by this time, when I did theater in high school, I found improv. I was a terrible actor, but I absolutely loved improv and got to enjoy that. And so at that point, I've been doing improv for almost 15 years. And so while I was working at the residential facility for mental health, I was also teaching at an improv theater company, teaching level 0, basic 101, drop-in, 2-hour class for people who've never done it before. And I started bringing the psychology into the improv, and people really engaged about how they loved how I was able to bring people together. Mm-hmm. Because of that, I was asked to start working or to bring some of this work to Salesforce and then Dropbox and then Kaiser Permanente and so on and so on. And so that's where I started moving more towards the direction of, okay, how can I create spaces in organizations so that they can come together and work with one another? And so I used to just do improv. Now I use improv as a tool to help develop a deeper understanding of a concept, such as what does psychological safety look like? What does open communication look like? And now I've expanded my skill set, expanded the people that I work with. And now I focus on helping, like I said earlier, teams to work together, to be more collaborative, to be more productive through creating psychological safety, building that trust, and open communication. And I've had the distinct pleasure to work with amazing organizations, a lot of tech companies, but now focus more on community-based organizations. So I recently worked with a nonprofit for domestic violence. I recently worked with an ambulance company. And then I had the fortunate pleasure of working with an entire middle school, the teachers and the principal, to help create safety. And so, and that's kind of what brought me to here today and get to speak to you.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's so many pieces of that I'm super interested in kind of digging into, and how, you're using them in Lead by Impact and just in general with helping others. I love the question and I love your journey, because now our listeners can really see how your path of education can maybe mirror theirs, or their own children's, and see where there's one thing that kept hitting me throughout your entire journey there was self-awareness. Even though it wasn't at the time, right? You really started understanding who you were, with, I would probably, if I had to guess, it was during that 7th grade, you're going into jiu-jitsu, and wait a minute, there was a big turning point, and now you've actually built on it, and you even added the improv thing. I have a lot of friends in improv. I love the fact, I don't know if all improv actors will tell you that though, but if you're terrible at acting, you'll be great at improv, which is actually kind of true. I think my buddy who's big in improv here in Chicago would say the same. One of the greatest things that I heard you say was, wait a minute, people actually are asking me about me. And you kind of, in Lead by Impact, and when we actually started talking, I got the sense that, wow, this person really knows people. As you notice, listeners, you guys heard this. Everybody heard this. You didn't even know what happened in school, but you knew you were a social being. And that's great. And here's one thing that you applied to an email when you first introduced yourself to me, which was a great question. And it was like, yes, yes, yes. It was the question of, I ran across in the certain education realms that you've worked with, teachers are also afraid to speak up, and it felt like as you were going through your journey, I felt, and I know I personally felt like this, and I know teachers feel like that maybe you in third or fourth or fifth grade where you can't really say anything and you want to, but no one's listening, or you're always just like, you're just the teachers, which is a huge, I mean, that is massive in education. It's unfortunate. It's not always like that in a lot of systems and places. Fortunately, right now, I'm not in a system where that is occurring, but people still feel that way, I would say, pretty much throughout any system. So let's jump into that big question, what is it that you saw in the middle school or the education realm that you've worked with that you're like, okay, number one, this is something that I can see changing throughout my own experiences or even through what the educators are seeing, because you're seeing both sides. And, number two is how are you actually building with teamwork into helping whatever that is? I know there's two very loaded questions, but I have a feeling you can handle them.
Those are two fantastic questions, and I appreciate them. So before I worked, so I got connected through this school. I'm doing through a conference, and it was about psychological safety. And the principal was like, "Yes, we absolutely need this. Let's talk more about it." And so him and I, by the way, this principal, one of the most caring individuals I had ever met. The amount of effort that he puts into try to figure out how to best support his faculty is tremendous. So I just want to put that out there, that he was an incredible human being. And he also realized, like, I want to know how to create more safety. And so as we dive into it, he's like, yeah, a lot of people, they're not really communicating a whole lot. People aren't really sharing classroom practices with one another. And we're trying to be a much more innovative school. And so if teachers aren't sharing classroom practices, that's going to stifle innovation. He was aware of that, which was amazing. So what I did before working with any of the faculty was I sent out just a very simple survey, anonymous survey, to hear, what are the things that are preventing you from feeling safe enough to share your practices with one another. And I got a lot of responses, but a lot of it was, there were several different categories or themes that kind of came out of that. One was, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look stupid and seem like I'm someone who does not know what I'm doing. And so there's a lot of fear there, which makes total sense. I don't want to look like an idiot. No one wants to look like an idiot. So, of course. And it was also especially more difficult for people who've been there longer, because they felt like that they should be seen as more of the expert. So it was harder for them to admit that maybe they don't know something. There is also worries about when people start presenting ideas that other people start shutting them down. Putting just dead in the water, whatever you say, nope, we've done that before. Nope, that's a bad idea. And so they're completely shutting people down, and that makes people feel less than, feel unheard, feel insignificant. So why should I speak up if all I'm going to do is get that? So those were really the two, I would say, bigger themes, is the worry about, and I think, all of us know what it's like to, I should know I should know more, or I should know this, I should be an expert in this, and if I'm not, I'm going to look bad. I'm going to look less than everyone else, and everyone's going to think I'm a terrible person. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to be homeless. And then that's going to be the end of humanity, right?
100%.
We all catastrophize.
Right.
But there's also legitimacy in that fear of, if I show that what I'm saying maybe not be the most up-to-date practices or anything like that, are there going to be negative consequences for that? Negative consequences can go from someone looking at them weird, someone giving them a sarcastic tone, people behaving around them differently. Now they're getting less assignments and being asked less to participate, and maybe even being demoted or getting less hours, or whatever that may look like. All those are extremely valid. So those were the things that we started to experience from it. The other thing too that I learned in the surveys was there was, I don't know if I really want to use this term, but it's not this term, but in the general direction of, there was a bit of trauma from the last principal.
Right.
The last principal was someone who was like, these are the things we're going to have to do, and if you don't do these things, then you're out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And so people did not want to say a word, because if they did and it went against what he was saying, then they would get reamed at. So there was still this leftover baggage, maybe that might be a better word,
right?
Baggage from the previous principal, even though this principal, from what I experienced from him, and from, no one said that he did anything that created that, but a lot of times our past experiences will carry over into the present.
Right.
And that happened for a lot of the teachers there.
I've personally have lived through that. You know, there is trauma. I would say there is trauma, and maybe it's previous or what's happening now. I've been through situations where I felt on the coals of fire, hell and brimstone, everything in my evaluation when some personal challenges were happening, and you just don't feel like a human. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then you just shut down and innovation ceases. Because we know in an innovative culture, right? It's you have to accept failure, and you it's okay. You screw up. All right, let's go figure it out, and let's keep pushing forward. It's like that on the teaching side as well. And kind of unpacking the older generation, try not to stereotype, but the technology boom that happened, especially just last year through the pandemic, scared a lot of people. And I think, and me being kind of an older teacher, but somehow I learned technology, I could see both sides of it. And so you totally understand that. But there's so many different ways that those professionals have so much more experience at that level that, they are just looked at as lazy or whatever, when it's not true at all. So totally get that. So yes, you did answer that question.
Check.
Yes.
Perfect.
So, and well, let's then dig into a little bit about, are these, am I hearing between the lines? And again, I'm a layman at this, so you're very, obviously trained in, the psychology and the sociology and everything that goes along with this. But is it a safe place to actually learn? Is that what we're getting at here? Just basic safety as an educator, as a student. Is there more or less? Expand on that.
What a fantastic question. You really are hitting some great nails on the head. I would say that's almost the in-between space. To me, the ultimate level of safety is when I can look at you and say, no, I don't agree with that at all. I actually think that's absolutely incorrect. I think pizza is way better than hot dogs. And I just need you to know that. So to be able to have intellectual friction, let's just say, be able to have intellectual conversation, intellectual debate, but zero social impact, zero emotional impact, where I take nothing personally, you take nothing personally, and we're able to really just have this lively discussion because we care about the ideas, and it's less about your idea. It's less about you as a human being, and it's more about, okay, what are we actually talking about here? And let's challenge and stress test each other's ideas so we can get the best idea moving forward. And so I think that, to me, is one of the ultimate creme de la creme places to be with psychological safety, where that's a real good indicator and good sense that there is safety within the community, within the people, between one another. And now, going on to your point, learner, I think there's a really, really need for that to happen. So, and learning comes, can I ask questions? So one of the things when I worked at the residential facility for mental health, my supervisor, one of the most brilliant minds I have ever met in my entire life. She was genius status. She knew everything, everything about everything about everything. It was amazing. And when I came to her to try to ask questions about things that I didn't know after being there only a few months, she would go, how do you not know that? What do you mean you don't know that? So then I did not like that, as I imagine most people would not.
Right.
And so I stopped asking questions. I stopped being curious. And so my learning slowed down dramatically. And so when we're talking about psychological safety, personally, what I look at it as, it's almost like scenarios and situations. Some places there'll be more safety, some places there'll be less. Right? So maybe there's safety to ask questions and learn, but maybe there's not safety to challenge people. Maybe there's ways that we make sure people feel included and a part of the group, but yet we don't want them to run the group, to start leading the group. So, or at least make them feel unsafe to try.
Right.
So how I personally see psychological safety is, what are the different situations and scenarios, giving and receiving feedback, brainstorming ideas, making decisions. Are people feeling safe in those processes? And I think there's different levels of safety. There's just one, being included in the space, two, being able to make sure that you can really learn and trial and error. And then also to be able to, just right there, I didn't say error. I said error, and you just laughed with me. So we got to enjoy that versus like looking at me weird, right? So you are helping me feel safe in this moment. So that's even a small example.
Right.
And then ultimate safety in me is, I think you're wrong, or I think your idea is wrong. And we might say, I think you're wrong, but everyone knows that it's not about me or the person. It's about the idea. It's about whatever it is that we're talking about. And if we can really challenge that, to me, that is the ultimate sense of psychological safety.
Yeah. I feel I love that, and thank you for sharing that. Like I said, I'm so glad I didn't put that. I would have said more than era. That is a mess on this entire thing, being from Indiana and goofy myself. But I will tell you, yes, it is the super foundation of what you just described. I know classrooms where that occurs. I know classrooms where there is somebody who kind of takes over. Learner, teacher, whatever. I've seen it. I've seen those things. So that's amazing. Now, here's the question. How do we get there in education? How do we get a classroom? How do we get a school? There's got to be an abbreviated version, and obviously you don't want to give away everything that you do, but you do this. So name some ways or maybe some strategies that either students, learners, educators, administrators can put together that space, or start to at least put together that space.
Again, great question. I think that's really one of the big questions, is like, okay, how do we create this space? There's definitely a lot to it. And so I want to kind of share some of the foundations that I think are important to create it. First thing is to, and there's going to be nuances, but first thing is to speak to the fact that there might not be, the first is to speak to the fact of what psychological safety is, and that it's a thing.
Right.
Okay. Now, sometimes in certain environments, people are going to get pushed back by the term psychological safety. Psychological safety. What is
exactly?
That's a weird term. And so if that's your environment and that's your space, what I would encourage you to do, and I'm working with more and more people to do this, is let's not have to call it psychological safety right away, but let's talk about what psychological safety does. hey, we want a space where people feel like they can open up and share and like not be belittled. We want a space where people can share their ideas and feel encouragement for one another so we can have more ideas. We want a space where everyone can voice their opinions and be able to challenge one another, but like take zero offense to it.
Right.
So I think one is just opening up the awareness of either the term, but if the term is kind of not working with people, then what it does, and letting people get a sense of that in the first place. So I think that's really step one, just creating awareness of this idea. It's not necessarily, I don't worry about the wording. I worry about what's underneath the wording and how can we get people connected to that rather than just the words itself. So people are not connecting to psychological safety. There are things that it does that people can connect to. So I think that's part one.
Yeah.
Part two is to then start recognizing this is really the job for the leaders. So I'm speaking to you all leaders out there, okay? Principals and all that, superintendents, all of that. It's up to you to let your people know, hey, we haven't done the best job of this. I'm aware of that. I know some people don't feel safe to open up. Some people are shut down and quiet. And I want you all to know that I hear you and that I see you and that I want us to work together to make a difference in that. And a couple of things are going on in that statement. One, you really do need to know why is it that you don't have that in your school? Where do you see it not happening? Where do you see places that people aren't safe? And really truly be aware of that rather than having a general sense. So being knowledgeable with your own staff and team as to why people aren't feeling safe. Again, people are quiet, we have high turnover rates, people are shutting down ideas, and so on and so on. So speaking up to the fact of leadership to say, I own this responsibility and I want us to work together. So with that, what we're doing is creating inclusion. One of the ways to help people start feeling safe is to be included in the process, getting included in what's going on. What doesn't help people feel safe is when you are told what to do to make other people feel safe. When, we know that we're going to have decision making and we're just going to do it. But if no one knows how that works, which I've worked with a lot of organizations and they don't have processes for decision making, brainstorming, all that stuff.
Right.
Then people are going to feel really uncertain, and then that makes them feel more unsafe because they don't know where to go, what questions to ask, who do I approach, where's my ability to participate in this, where can't I participate in this, and why can't I participate in that?
Yeah.
So once we start opening up the conversation, saying, hey, we want all people to be involved in this process of creating psychological safety around feedback or whatever it is we want to start on. We want to hear you. So you set the tone for that, and now you got to follow up with it. Because if you just stop there, that's going to hurt.
Yes. Yeah.
So then what are the first things that we can now tangibly do to start making that space? Well, like I said earlier, step one, do an anonymous survey and let people know, hey, we truly want to hear what are the places you don't feel safe? Where don't you feel heard? Where is it that we could do better? What would safety look like to you? Send out a survey and let people get a sense of, okay, they really want to hear me. And so here's a way that I can be heard. And then what you can do is make sure it's completely anonymous, because the anonymity, whatever that word is, helps people feel much more comfortable and safe to open up.
Right.
So as we're talking about psychological safety, you also want to make sure the behaviors in which you're trying to create psychological safety are also safe. So survey, very simple, step one. You get all the content, and then you read it through, and then you start having a sense of, oh, here are the themes that are coming up for people.
Yeah.
Then you can host, what I generally do is where, the work that I do is then we come together as a group, and I put up on the board, whatever board that is, and say, hey, here's all the things that you all talked about regarding where the team, the staff do not feel safe. what else is missing on that list? What else do you think should be on there? And making sure that they're, again, feeling included in the discussion, feeling heard. We're inviting them in. We're bringing them in to say, work with us. What do you have to say? Tell us your wisdom, your truth, your experience. Let's hear you. And making sure you follow through with that.
100%.
Yes.
No,
yes.
I just love the follow through. That's the biggest piece that I think, we see in education. We see a lot of leaders. If I can interject a little bit about yes, we get through the surveys and everything, but then the follow through, like what's the follow through? And that takes consistency, right? That takes like a consistent effort. This is not just a one and done thing. Which is amazing. You're hitting it right on the head. I love it. I love it. Before you go further into, the pieces, like I said, I don't want you to give everything away that you do, but that's the foundation of it. I will personally, like I said before, I've personally seen schools that are very cohesive in that space. Go try something. Tell us what happened, or we'll come and check it out. It's open. If teacher A is not in unison with teacher B, let's go ahead and try some things, and let's figure out which one is the best for the students, obviously, but also for the educators as well. And now you're talking about real learning communities, which that's what I see the undertone of all of this is. Learning does hurt, right? Like it's not supposed to be like everybody's happy all the time.
Yeah.
There needs to be that friction, like I heard you say in there, which is awesome. I wanted to round out if there was one, and this is going to be difficult to do, but if there was one thing, Michael's in charge of education. And it could be per system or the entire thing. Why not? Let's shoot for the moon here. You would change immediately if you had the power to do that. What would one thing be?
Well,
I know there'd be more than one, but
3-day work weeks always.
I'm there.
Check.
I like that.
So that's an amazing question. So this idea of the one thing, if I could change, to be honest, there's a little bit of layeredness to it, but I think, well, my mind goes to systems and processes versus kind of more the way people are. So I'm just going to stick with the way people are, because systems and processes, those could adjust and change.
Right.
But what I would want for the world of education is this idea to work on having such extreme empathy for everyone. Empathy for the students, empathy for the teachers, for your fellow teachers, empathy for the principals, empathy for everybody in the system of education, so people can really understand one another. And then with that empathy, I think that
I'm
might be a
loving
band. With that empathy, what we can do is remove the us versus them. And let's make it us versus children being left behind. Us versus harmful behavior. Instead of us versus them inside the system, let's come together through our deep empathy of understanding one another and make the enemy divisive conflict, make the enemy children being left behind. That's where we want to go against. And so that's what and that can be done. It's done in many different places. I've got to work with the last school, do a little bit of that, and really us versus this outside force that is harming the students and the faculty, the parents, the community, all of that. So that's what I would love to change regarding people.
100%. Love that answer. And obviously from a people person who grew up through a system where he saw the goods and the bads and then created the goods out of it. know your enemy, and it's not each other. Right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yes.
Wonderfully said, Michael. I really appreciate that. I wanted to end off here and close out. How can people connect with you? How can they connect with Lead by Impact? Because you are doing some amazing things. Not only the thing that I love is, yes, you have the experience with the big corporations and big entities, but now in our further conversation, I'll just tell the listeners this. You were like, look, I am humbled to work with people helping people. So going into not-for-profits, education, and those types of things. And I love your focus going there. So, and I know we have a lot of listeners in those areas, especially the education area. How can people find you, Michael?
Well, again, I just want to say thank you for all this. And I actually have a little resource for your listeners. So I created a nice, simple, easy to understand infographic of 5 steps that people can take to start creating psychological safety in their space. And so if you go to leadbyimpact.com/info, INFO for infographic, you'll be able to download that for free. And again, it's a nice, easy to understand infographic of how you can start building that psychological safety in your space.
Excellent. I will add that into the notes as well. So if you're listening, watching, wherever you're getting this podcast, that will be in the notes for you just to click on and go right in there. Michael Vargas also on LinkedIn as well. You're out there. And lead by example. Lead by impact.
We should all lead by example.
100%.
So yes, please.
Leadbyimpact.com. Michael, thank you so much for sharing not only what you do and how you help, but also your personal journey. It means a lot to the listeners. Listeners, please connect with Michael if you're looking to create those spaces and change up your group dynamics. I know there's a lot of administrators that I know that are frustrated, that are tired and tough. It's been a heck of a year for everybody in education. Trust me, I know what you do. Our listeners now know what you do. You're going to build that foundation. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us.
And Peter, I just want to say again, thank you so much for creating this platform for people to be able to get the resources and the help that they need and to be able to hear conversations that they're just dying for. So thank you for creating that space. And seriously, I felt, not only extremely safe, but I had a lot of fun in this. So thank you so much.
Awesome. And I really appreciate it. Humbled. And I'm also humbled for y'all listeners and watchers. Thank you so much. Pass it along. Let's help some people out. And thank you again. We'll catch you next time on Disrupt Education.